The streets of Birmingham are where I was born and raised, and I still live here now. It's my home, and I'm a Brummie through and through. Over the last 18 months, my life has changed, but I haven't let that change me. I'm Dee Kelly, and in this show, I'll be talking to real people about real issues that affect them. It's estimated that around a quarter of the UK's population will be treated for mental health issues at some point during their lifetime, with the most common being depression. I suffer with depression myself, and so I understand how hard it can be to live with, and how difficult it can be to ask for help. Apparently though, it's a lot more difficult for men. 1 in 4 women will require treatment for depression at some point during the course of their lives, compared with just 1 in 10 men. There's an argument that women are just more prone to depression, but with figures showing that men are more than 3 times more likely to die by suicide, it seems to me that there are plenty of men not getting the help that they need, and I want to know why. So I'm talking to John, who writes a blog about his battle with depression and alcoholism and runs a small support group for men. So John, it's like, you know, obviously with mental health issues, I suffer with depression, but obviously I'm like more, I've been classed as like bereavement depression. But it is something that I'm really passionate about. And I was at a festival about a year ago, and there was a tent there that was specifically designed towards mental health with men. And that kind of made me think. I thought, hang on a minute, they're kind of right, because every sort of session I've been to in clinic, it has predominantly been full of women. Do you think it's probably, you know, with mental health and men, do you reckon the caveman effect probably comes into it, where men are probably a bit more wary about admitting that they are suffering from a mental health issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I often quote myself as being, I'll class myself as a Neanderthal with depression, because basically, if I hadn't have been through it, I would be one of these idiots that says, you know, pull yourself together. People see it as weakness and things like that, and I think it's harder for men to admit that they've got a problem.
I call it the caveman effect, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. The figures show that women find it easier to ask for help when they're suffering with depression. So what is it about men that's so different?
Well, men can find it much more difficult to ask for help for a variety of reasons. Partly because they don't tend to think about their feelings in the same way that women do, so they may not recognise that they're depressed, which are external to themselves. Also, the symptoms they show tend to be more anger or antisocial traits, and particularly in young men. They won't say to them, well, I feel depressed. They start being difficult. So that creates a much more difficult dynamic to help. I think men as well find it hard to go to the doctors because that's the admission of liability and feeds into the stereotype of I've got to be the guy who is in control. So to admit that you need help can be seen by some men as akin to being out of control.
Do you think the services or the availability to services have changed? Have they got any better? Have they got any worse?
It's hard to say, really. I speak to a lady whose son, it was called John. Unfortunately, he killed himself in 2003, and it was very, very close to the month that I went into the booze clinic in 2003. And realistically, that's 11 years, and it was 11 years ago and whatever. But when I'm talking to his mum now, you know, it's the things that I talk about within the NHS were exactly the things that were going wrong in the NHS back then. And in the end, he killed himself, unfortunately, in 2003. So I know from her experience, nothing much has really changed. I do believe the help is there, and there are some people out there that, you know, within the NHS are amazing.
Once you go through to the GP and you're referred, you should really start to get the help that you need. But I won't sit here and tell you that it's happening everywhere. It really does depend on how up to date your GP is. And also, to be fair, when you get referred, there are the third sector organisations out there that can help to support before it goes to crisis, so it becomes a more illness mode rather than looking at well-being. And also, if you're sectioned, so it depends at what point you're trying to get into the system, because as you know, there are issues around funding. I'm not going to sit here and say they're not. There are issues around funding. So if, unfortunately, you get into the system at certain points and you need counselling, the waiting list is quite long, and sometimes people are not getting access to the counselling they need quickly enough.
I think that part of the problem comes from the macho image that we've come to identify with men. On top of all the pressures of life, men are expected to be brave and strong, and are more likely to talk about football with their friends than they are about their feelings. It's something that's been drilled into us since we were children, and is a big part of the stigma surrounding men and mental health.
If you look at young boys, they do tend to be more driven to action, doing things, and girls will talk. So there's that sort of biological difference as well. But we still get this tough hero kind of stereotype, whilst at the same time men are expected to be sensitive new age figures as well.
Men are very proud. When women will always go to the doctor, because a higher proportion of women will go to the doctor, many men won't go to the doctor, and unfortunately they don't see the doctor until it becomes a crisis.
So, many men don't reach the point where they're ready to ask for help until they're already in crisis, and as we'll find out shortly, that can often be too late. So far, we've found out about the differences between male and female attitudes towards depression, and heard firsthand from somebody who's suffered with depression for more than half of their life. We'll be looking at what can happen when people don't get the help that they need, as well as the support that's available from the government and third sector organisations. There are more than 6,000 suicides in the United Kingdom every year, with young and middle-aged men being most at risk. Around a third of those that commit suicide are people that have previously sought help for mental health issues. So I want to know what drives a person to the point where they feel as though there's no way out, even when they're being treated.
Well, for somebody who's feeling suicidal and thinking and planning perhaps of ending it all, usually the most predominant factor is their feeling of hopelessness. I think when people are depressed, they tend to have limited thoughts. They tend to be negative thoughts. They don't seem usually able to problem solve very well. So it seems like there are no answers when you're depressed, because you can only see a long black tunnel. But depression in itself is not necessarily the most predominant factor with suicide. It's the hopelessness. And so you can feel hopeless without necessarily being in a full depression. For many people, obviously, they can't see a way out.
Quite a while back now, it's after my episode, and I was sleeping in bed, and I got up, and literally the only reason I got up and got dressed was to go out and kill myself. I was going to chuck myself off Asda car parks, sorry about advertising, and at the time I was living at my dad's, and I popped into my old house to oddly say goodbye to my cats. And you know, something just changed in my mind that I wasn't going to do it. But literally, the only reason I'd got up and left the house was this is it, let's just go and let's just finish it.
Had you thought that way often, or was it kind of just, you know, did it just kind of like jump in your head? I mean,
I think about it. I still think about it now. I still think about suicide now. You know, and I don't know whether it's necessarily I want to be dead. It's just, you know, at times when the pain's going on in your head, it's just that thought that it'd just be so much easier if I was just gone.
John's living proof that it's possible to overcome suicidal thoughts. It's something that he did by himself. But what help is there for those who can't do it alone, and what can be done to stop them?
If someone wants to do something, it's very difficult to stop them. Where I think we can support them is if someone is crying out for help, ensuring that we have the counselling services available, we have the preventative work in place where they can join.
There are a number of organisations across the country that focus on suicide prevention, two of which are Forward for Life and Common Unity. Earlier this year they teamed up to create a project that aimed to help unemployed men in Dudley.
The Man-Made programme was developed early this year, early in 2015. Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council wanted to find a solution to supporting men who are unemployed and looking for work, long-term unemployed, to help them with their resilience levels, to help them cope, because men don't seek help. And when things get tough for men, some men think about taking their own life. Some men don't do what a lot of women might do. Don't want to stereotype, but they don't do what a lot of women do. They don't seek help. They would rather deal with the situation as a man would. So the Man-Made programme gives men the opportunity to come together in one space that's safe, and it sounds really airy-fairy, but it's not, to give them the opportunity to talk about what's going on for them in life and why life is so tough and what skills they've learned to adopt or can learn from each other to help them better deal with the complications they're going through in life right now, because men aren't given that space.
Devising the actual programme and putting it together, one of the things that we noticed as we started to deliver the programme was that there was certain things coming out for the men, and we couldn't have such a fixed programme. So the programme changed as we went along to marry up with some of the things that the men were coming out with. So the loss and the workshop around loss, there was a lot of loss coming out from the guys, of loss of jobs, loss of relationships. So it was quite a nice programme to make sure it was quite flexible and could flow and actually engage with the men. And that was what was really beneficial to the Man-Made programme, is that the programme can change to meet the needs of the guys that were in the room at the time.
So, there is help available for those that ask for it, even if it's not always easy to find. The difficult thing about depression is that we all deal with it differently. Some people are able to talk about it openly, whereas others isolate themselves. If my own experiences with depression have taught me anything, it's that you have to find what works best for you.
For me now, it doesn't matter how bad it will get, I'll never do it. You know, there's not in a million years, because, you know, when I had the episode breakdown, you know, you're at that stage and you think you know your life is over. Fortunately, as you come through, you know that you were wrong, you know, and every day you survive it, and every day that you get through, you know, it's just another bonus. I know I'll never do it, you know, yeah. Simple as that.
The big push now has to be to get people to talk about depression and hopefully overcome the stigma surrounding it. As a society, we're making progress on that front, but once people are ready to ask for help, it needs to be easy to find and readily available. Men find it more difficult to ask for help than women. We need to get better at talking about mental health and make it clear that it's okay for men to have feelings and to share them with others. Attitudes need to change, and the mental health service in this country needs the support of the government to offer a comprehensive service to people when they're ready to be helped.
It is hard to ask for help, and it's also, the problem is as well, it's hard to ask for help, even harder when you don't get any, when you've asked for help.
We're saying it's not rocket science, aren't we, Karen?
It isn't rocket science, it's just that we need to get more people to start talking about it and be quite open about it.
As a city, we have a responsibility to do this, but more than this, not expecting our health partners or the third sector organisations or the council to be in this on their own. We have to work together, because without good mental health, you have no health.